Hey everyone, this is Tom. Before we start this week's episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast, I need to let you know we're having our Device Talks meetings this fall. It's not going to be an in-person event. It's going to be our Device Talks Tuesdays program. Yes, this is just like our Device Talks meetings. We're going to have conversations about starting companies, raising capital, developing new essential devices, finding more effective ways to manufacture those devices and to distribute them, navigate the changing regulatory and reimbursement pathways, and identify the next new hot tech. We're going to cover it all. All you need to do, you don't have to travel anywhere, no hotels, no airports, of course. You just have to go on to DeviceTalks.com. We're going to have each session up there for you. You can see what we're working on through September, but we're going to carry you all the way through the holidays and into the new year. Device Talks Tuesdays, it's a great way to continue to gather. We still need to talk. We still need to share ideas. We still need to hear from each other, and you're going to be able to do that on Device Talks Tuesdays. So go to DeviceTalks.com. We have a great lineup of partners and sponsors that are going to be putting together great content for you. So again, go to DeviceTalks.com to register for our Device Talks Tuesdays program. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Tom Salemi of Device Talks. Welcome back to this episode of Device Talks Weekly. No Chris Newmarker this week, but I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be joined by my colleagues, Danielle Kirsh, Senior Editor of Mass Device, and Sean Whooley, the first timer to the podcast, is our Assistant Editor. Sean and Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let's just take a second to let folks know who you are and what you cover. Danielle, how long have you been here at Mass Device? You're certainly here. Actually, you both were here before me, but I think, Danielle, you've been here first.
Yeah, I've been around since December 2016. I've just been working on everything medical device related.
Excellent. Do you have any specific areas you enjoy covering the most? Or
probably Big 100 and Women in Medtech are my two big special projects that I enjoy working on.
And we'll be talking about Women in Medtech in a moment. That's a great project. And Sean, how about yourself? You came on board, I think, just before I did.
Yeah, I technically became full-time in November, but it's been just over a year since I joined on. And mostly I do the feeds, all the news releases, and little bits and pieces from everywhere for Mass Device. And then the other sites, MDO and the drug delivery and drug discovery, a little bit of everything.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you both on here. So why don't we start off, Danielle, with just talking a little bit about the Women in Medtech project. What is it and when will we see it? And we can sort of get into how people can participate in it going forward. But what is it? What is the Women in Medtech feature?
Women in Medtech started from an idea that I had when I said, there's a lot going on in Medtech. I wonder what women in Medtech think about something that was going on. And from there, it's evolved into a magazine where I get the chance to talk to different company founders, CEOs, startup presidents, and find out what innovations they're currently working on, what they have in the pipeline, what they think about the future of medtech, and things like that.
So how many of these have you done so far?
We are currently on our third year.
That's excellent. And I love the distinction. I think we talked about this earlier in a staff call, just that you really focus more or at least as much on the work that the women are doing in medtech as opposed to the people themselves. Is that right?
That's correct. It's mostly just about what projects they're working on instead of being like, look at all these women in the industry. Instead, it's look at this innovation that's happening. And oh, by the way, it's being run by women.
That's great. Yep. That's the way it should be covered. So that's fantastic. So where are you in putting that together? I know we're all going to help out eventually, but where are you and what can folks do if they have someone they know who we should be talking to for this feature?
Yeah. So right now we are currently looking at, as I mentioned before, founders and CEOs of small companies to talk to find out about their innovations. But we also look to some of the bigger companies just to give like an honorable mention to some of the engineers or any of the women that are working in some of the C-suite level positions at the big medtech companies.
Excellent. So do you accept nominations through some process, through email? What's the best way of people out there reaching out to you?
I wouldn't say it's nomination based. I would say more so we're always looking for somebody that we can talk to. We always want to know about what new is happening and who is running these companies.
That's a great question. No, that's excellent. So what is the best way for folks to reach you?
Probably email or LinkedIn. Those are my two main areas where you can get a hold of me easiest.
And your email address is dkirsh@wtwhmedia.com?
That's correct.
It'll tell us how we spell Kirsh, because I spelled it wrong last time you were on the podcast.
Kirsh, no C.
Cardinal sin, misspelling a fellow journalist's name, which is terrible. Terrible. So that's great. Yeah, we're going to have that. Now that'll publish where will that be published? And we have a couple of other things we'll be doing differently this year, but where will that be published initially?
It publishes with Medical Design and Outsourcing in November.
And we're planning to do a podcast based around that as well. And also our November 3rd Device Talks Tuesdays will be dedicated to the future. So I hope we'll have a number of great stories to tell on that event. And folks can register for that at devicetalks.com. We'll get some information about that shortly. So excellent. Well, I know we're all going to be helping out on the project, and I think it's great that you put this together, Danielle. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Well, we're going to now move into what had just been named Newmarker's Newsmakers feature, but of course, then Chris Newmarker leaves us high and dry and decides to take a day off. But I'm happy to have Sean Whooley here to deliver the top 5 news items of the week. We're going to do as we normally do. We'll hit numbers 5 and 4. Take a break for our first interview, which will be with Kaila Krum of Truist Securities. We'll break down Medtronic's recent quarterly call. And then we'll hit numbers 3 and 2. And then I'll run the interview I did with Juan-Pablo Mas of Action Potential Venture Capital. They invested in a very cool company called Echo, but we'll talk more about that. Juan-Pablo has had some unfortunate contacts with the wildfires in California. We'll hit upon that and also talk about another important project he's working on, which is called LatinxVC. So, and then of course, after that, we'll hit upon number 1. I have an idea of what number 1 will be. It came up today, and it's pretty big news. So, Sean Whooley, do you need a cute little name for this? Whooley's Wonders or Whooley's Winners or anything like that? Or are you good with Newmarker's Newsmakers?
You can leave it under Chris's name, I don't think.
You could be in a hashtag, my friend. This is big time.
I'll leave it.
So, what is number 5 on our top 5 list? We'll go back to that for this episode.
Number 5 is a good segue for the coming interview, but it's Medtronic's faster than expected recovery during its first quarter of the fiscal year. The story was that, as CEO Geoff Martha said, they saw improvement from the previous quarter, and the results reflect a, quote, faster than expected recovery from the depths of the pandemic, which they saw back in April. They are still trading up. They were trading up at the time over 2.5%, and they obviously people are impressed by what they saw this past quarter with Medtronic.
Yeah, no, it was a very cool call. They did it on video, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the interview. But Chris Newmarker, even when he's taking time off, is working harder than any man in show business. He put together a feature that's up on the web, 7 technologies to make new Medtronic even more powerful. And he's got a very imposing throne there with an M on it. So we'll link to that on the show notes and make sure you see that on social media. But he did a good job breaking down the call as well. So that is number 5. It's such a great lead into the interview. I'm tempted to go into it, but let's stick to the format. What is our fourth largest newsmaker of the week, Sean Whooley?
Number 4 was that the FDA clears Pelvital's pelvic floor device. It's called the Flight device for treating stress urinary incontinence. It's touted as first of its kind, non-invasive, intravaginal home use device designed to strengthen the pelvic floor muscles, helping with stress urinary incontinence. The company said it's the only product to use an expanding area of treatment called mechanotherapy to treat the pelvic floor muscle weakness. So evidently people are very interested in a device that's clearly, as they say, first of its kind.
Okay, well, that's a great story. Another important win for women's health. And something else we saw this week was Hologic's acquisition of Acessa Health for $80 million. Another win for women's health in medtech.
Yeah, and another win for women in medtech, since Acessa Health's co-founder is Kim Rodriguez, and also she's also their president and CEO. So.
Great point. All right. Well, a triple win then. So that's a good one. So, all right. Well, now we'll get back into our conversation about Medtronic. I spoke with Kaila Krum. She's managing director of Truist Securities, and she'll walk us through Medtronic's quarterly call. But first, a message. Hey folks, Tom again. Before we get into this interview with Kaila Krum of Truist Securities, just wanted to let you know that Device Talks Tuesdays begins on September 8th. We have Isaac Rowe, the CFO of Thrive Earlier Detection. He was on the podcast a few weeks ago. And I'm happy to have Karen Long of the KCK Group on the panel as well. They're going to be talking about raising money during these Zoom times, not only raising money, but really how to help move your startups forward during these times. So this is a discussion brought to you by Finnegan. It's going to be a great conversation, helpful to you, and another way that we can bring you insights and information on Device Talks. So go to devicetalks.com to register. Kaila Krum, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about Medtronic's quarterly call. First question is a simple one. What'd you think of the video, Geoff Martha up there? I think it worked.
Great question. I thought it was great. And I hope that more companies decide to take that approach. It's nice to actually see a person in person.
Good point. Give them credit for trying, because video is a lot more difficult than just being on audio in your sweatpants and t-shirt, although I'm sure they wear ties on their quarterly calls, no doubt.
Exactly.
So the first actual question I have is just, there was almost a change in tone from previous calls. Not that I've listened to a lot of the quarterly calls, but it just seemed that there's a new energy and a new direction from Medtronic, which is really saying something. And Geoff Martha kind of had almost an evangelistic feel to it. Like I felt like he should have been up there wearing a black Steve Jobs turtleneck as opposed to the suit and tie he was wearing. Was this something that had been telegraphed, this sort of we're going to make some changes at Medtronic, or did this come as a surprise to folks who are watching the company?
Yeah, I would say that, the historical bear thesis on Medtronic is just that, they're really too big to grow. But we do think that that's changing. As you mentioned, Geoff Martha is now in place. He's kind of hitting his stride, with new leadership in place. And in the midst of this meaningful new product cycle, this is also a company that's, willing, able to invest now in order to drive sustained improvements in revenue growth. And all of that should be, has been well received by investors.
And there was some discussion that you kind of came out of the gate talking about market share, which is something that he indicated that is not something they focus on. What does that say to you? That they're looking to grow? Was it really that significant a departure from the way they've handled calls in the past?
Yeah, I think, the company has always done a nice job developing new markets, but now it's more about holding on to market share and growing market share in these categories. And I think that, you look at a lot of these other smaller, more nimble players in the places, in the areas where they compete. And now Medtronic is kind of required to act more and innovate more as a smaller, more nimble company would. And I think that Geoff had mentioned on the call, he made the comment, go big or go home. And I think that's what you're going to see. I think they're going to go big, get bigger, and again, just drive sustained growth in their business.
Yeah, no, I actually have that on my notes as well. I wanted to bring that up, and I will in a moment. But going back to your nimble point, that's a great one. And he actually said, look, we're competing against a lot of focused, smaller companies, not just here, but in China and other places around the world. As constructed, Medtronic's doing pretty well. Does it really need to slim down and to become nimble to find that growth? Or is that just sort of a new CEO coming in and trying to put his or her stamp on things?
Yeah, I think that, again, Medtronic is kind of, they've always focused on scale. And so I think that there has been this sort of renewed focus on market share and growth. And you hear them highlight now several new recent product launches, 130, plus approvals year to date. I think all of that tells tells you that, they're going to continue to invest, to drive sort of these smaller tuck-in deals. And eventually, over time, they'll do some other sort of bigger deals. But I think there will be this focus on really, driving the pipeline and growing this share gain across their business.
That's great. Talking about go big or go home, I think that was in reference to a question about the robotics program that Geoff Martha said, look, there's an established leader, a competitor in the space. We know that, but we're going to really make an effort to become the leader in the space. And it seemed to carry over to the diabetes business as well, which has had its share of difficulties. Now my question, how big of Medtronic's future do you see tied to robotics and diabetes? Because those, I don't know, they seem almost like also ran sort of businesses within Medtronic until recently.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a company that's doing, $30 billion about in annual sales, and it's tough to point to one or two products that could really move the needle for them. And so, we look at soft tissue robotics and the opportunity, the potential there, and think, this could be a single product that could move the needle for them. And that's something, renal denervation, we've talked quite a bit about is also a big area. It's obviously early. Both of these are early. But again, this renewed focus on innovation, I think is what's really important.
I was covering Ardian when it was still a startup, so I'm definitely rooting for the renal denervation business to become something. It's a great story. But focusing, they talked also about R&D. They made the interesting deal with Blackstone to invest resources in its diabetes business. But beyond that, they said, Geoff said, we really want to get some more R&D capability here. Spoke specifically to robotics, RTG, deep brain stimulation, and diabetes, as I mentioned. Do you see an increase in resources going to R&D, or are they sort of staying the course there?
Yeah, I think, especially at a time, and it's interesting, at a time where I think a lot of companies right now are sort of forced to pull back on spending, Medtronic has been in a position where it can flex its balance sheet. And so it talks about, they've been talking about sort of investing in the pipeline, investing in, structural, operational, and cultural changes. And I think all of that combined should support, their growth goals over the next, quarters and years to come.
And finally, M&A. He talked about the focus being on tuck-ins, and their tuck-ins get up to billions of dollars. So that's a lot of tuck. Do you see M&A being Medtronic being an acquisitive company for the rest of 2020 and going into 2021?
So we do, and we expect there to be a continuation of these more sizable tuck-in type deals. I think that what we've seen be a really successful strategy, at other companies as well, is to layer on these kind of growthier businesses into the core infrastructure of a Medtronic. And so, we've seen them do a couple deals like Companion. There's been a handful of recent deals, again, during a time where a lot of other companies are not investing in their business. And I do expect that'll continue in the second part of this year into next.
Terrific. And the final question about Medtronic, again, interesting comment from Geoff Martha that Medtronic wants to put the tech into Medtech. And he talks specifically about AI and building out technology functionality. That's been an area that they've focused on, but they talked a lot about that during the call as well. What did that say to you?
I think we're going to see more and more of this, kind of combination between healthcare and technology. And it's something that, Medtronic has always, again, been very good at building new markets. And now it's more, again, about just maintaining that market share, growing market share. And I expect that through that combination of tech and healthcare, they're going to continue to be very successful in the space.
Terrific. Final question just about Medtronic really kind of wraps up the quarterly call season, I think. You've sat in on many of these calls. We're seeing some better results, better performances from companies as they emerge from COVID spring. But what are some of the larger takeaways that we can look at in the medtech industry? What are maybe 2 or 3 points that you found interesting from all the calls you've sat in on?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing encouraging signs of recovery across geographies. And even, Medtronic is sort of the latest positive data point, but, they're saying even into August, we're seeing a continuation of the recovery here. So, I think that there are still a lot of unknowns. A lot of companies are still holding back on guidance. They don't want to provide guidance yet. And that makes sense. Again, there's things that we just don't know in the second part of this year. But I think that the interest in medtech more broadly is still largely there. And, you think about just medtech in the middle of an election year, when in reality, this has kind of been more of a COVID year than an election year. But, I think that medtech tends to be viewed as sort of part of the solution. And so, even through the second part of this year, I expect that our sector will continue to do well going forward.
That's great. All right. Well, great insights on Medtronic and the industry as a whole. Kaila Krum of Truist Securities, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back here with Sean Whooley, Assistant Editor of Mass Device, and Danielle Kirsh, Senior Editor of Mass Device. And we're talking about our top 5 newsmakers of the week. Sean, we've already hit numbers 5 and 4. Lay number 3 on us. What is it?
Number 3 is iRhythm closing a $220 million offering, public offering, which the proceeds it plans to put towards, it said, funding growth initiatives, as well as working capital and other general corporate purposes. The company develops artificial intelligence-based screening, diagnosis, and management technology for atrial fibrillation, or AFib, which is obviously a pretty big deal. It's kind of the precursor for stroke. So people are obviously interested in reading about a company getting quite a bit of money, especially in these times, for their stroke prevention technology.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a digital tech company that was kind of ahead of its time with its IPO. And it's just interesting with Medtronic talking about their focus on tech, and Geoff Martha saying he wants to put the tech into medtech. It'll be interesting to see just where iRhythm sort of ends up in the future, if it how it builds out its franchise and works more closely, I guess, with some other medical device companies. So, great one. And what is our number 2 biggest news story of the week?
Number 2, Fast Company magazine had a list of best workplaces for innovators, and among them was Boston Scientific and Abbott. Boston Scientific actually ranked in the top 10, I believe. It was number 5. And Abbott was number 12 on the list of 100 companies. And they were kind of the only 2 representatives for MedTech, both in the top 20. The magazine said over 850 companies applied across more than 24 countries around the world for a place in the rankings. So for Boston Scientific and Abbott, that's pretty good, I guess, indication of what kind of innovations they've got going on over there.
All right, well, that's great for those 2 companies. I guess I thought we would have found more medtechs on the list. I've always seen us as an innovation-friendly industry, but sure, it's all politics. That's how they come up with these names. But let's get into another innovation story. I spoke, as I mentioned up top, with Juan-Pablo Mas. He is a partner at Action Potential Venture Capital, which is a corporate venture arm for JSK. And we'll talk a bit about lots of things about what Action Potential does, about their recent investment in Echo, and about work that Juan-Pablo Mas has done to help others find their way into the venture capital industry. Juan-Pablo Mas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Very happy to be here.
No, there's lots to talk about. You have been directly impacted by the fires out there in California. What has your life been like the last couple of days?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's been a ride, a scary one, and thankfully we're in a better place now. Personally speaking, we were evacuated due to the Santa Cruz County fires that have been raging here the last week. Thankfully our family got out there with sufficient time and warning, and fingers crossed, hope to be back to our home and town and regular life in the next week or so.
Well, that's great to hear. We'll certainly hope for that. Let's talk a little bit about your group, Action Potential Venture Capital. I know when we talked previously, you were heavily focused on bioelectronic medicine. I also know there's been push into digital health as well. So what are your origins? What are you investing in? What are your areas of interest?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it has been an interesting evolution. So the company, is GlaxoSmithKline started SR1 some 35 years ago to do biopharmaceutical venture capital. And in 2020, 2013, Action Potential Ventures was formed as the second venture capital arm of GSK, with a focus on specifically bioelectronic medicines or next generation neuromodulation, aimed at trying to develop therapies that had advantages and competed with traditional drug standard of care across a variety of chronic diseases, and doing so via the nervous system and the ability to modulate organ function in chronic diseases in a very targeted, safe fashion. So neuromodulation is nothing new to the medical device community. Naturally, its roots run deep in medical devices, from pacemaking and defibrillators to DBS or movement disorders and other conditions. And so what GSK wanted to do was to help foster and lead the innovation into miniaturized neuromodulation and bioelectronic medicines that could actually treat a much broader swath of patients across a variety of conditions in a way that traditional drugs had not been perhaps accustomed to doing, in part due to the systemic exposure of those drugs to the body that leads to challenges and side effects and the therapeutic window issues that drugs often have when not particularly targeted. So that was the onus for creating an internal group at GSK to develop bioelectronic medicines, which has now spun out to form a new joint venture with Alphabet's Verily, a new called Galvani. And our fund has remained under GSK. We invest off of the balance sheet. We invest for financial returns and operate much more like a traditional venture capital fund, although we are evergreen in nature and do have a strategic remit. And in terms of that strategic area of interest, historically, it's been very much focused on peripheral nervous system and therapeutic direct nerve stimulation. When I joined, that was the focus. Since I've joined in 2014, and working with GSK, we've broadened that some to include sort of the entire nervous system, including the central nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord. We've done investments in companies like Kaila Health that are transcutaneous or non-invasive devices. We've begun to look at enabling platform technologies that essentially open up a variety of new forms of delivering energy into the body. And so even increasingly not even limited to electrical energy, but also as ultrasound uses acoustic energy, as electromagnetic energy delivered to affect cell function in a variety of conditions non-invasively, and even with select investments in companies that will denervate or essentially do blocking of a neural circuit permanently or temporarily and reversibly. So really our focus is targeted and precision energy as a medicine, which is an expansion of what we have historically, our roots have been. By and large, we view those as bioelectronic medicines, and hence that's still the focus of the fund.
Well, that's interesting, because let's talk about Echo now, because Echo wouldn't seem, at least to me on the surface, fit into sort of the bioelectronic medicine angle. It's more of it's a medical imaging device, and you can get into the particulars in a moment. So tell us how you came to know of Echo, and tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so Echo we're very excited about. We learned about the company through a co-investor of ours at Kaila Health, director there, Ted Katouzis, who is an emergency room physician at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago, is also an investor with Magnetar Capital. They have affiliate funds called Fiscus and Reimagined Ventures that deploy capital into medical devices across other healthcare areas. So Ted pulled us into the conversation when Echo was looking to consider bringing on an additional sort of a Series B plus round to facilitate, manufacturing and operations ramp up and anticipation of a commercial launch. And Ted knew that we had an interest in neuromodulation, in delivering energy into the body. Obviously, the by and large, the predominant usage of ultrasound today in medical practice is diagnostic and imaging, and certainly that's Echo's focus for the time being. But we too at Action Potential have seen a dramatic rise in innovation and interesting new therapeutic modalities and applications using ultrasound outside of the body to either stimulate a nerve safely and oftentimes even at depth in the body, stimulate whole organ function, be involved in improving drug delivery and its ability to be targeted and timely. With that theme that we are seeing energy as a medicine, we really dug into echo's potential in this category, because what's limiting from an ultrasound perspective is, in fact, the quality of image and the power and depth at which ultrasound can reach inside the body to perform any of these therapeutic functions that I'm mentioning. So that's when we really saw differentiation in Echo's proprietary chip-based PMUT technology, or piezoelectric micro-machined ultrasound technology, from anything else we had seen in the market. And so for our investment in Echo is driven at its core by their ability to really reinvent and establish a new technology for point-of-care handheld ultrasound in the diagnostic capacity, along with their cloud-based system that integrates into hospital enterprise software and medical records and billing and so forth. But behind that, we have seen huge potential, and it's in that same technology's ability to deliver bioelectronic medicines non-invasively to targets in the body for a variety of medical conditions, and as a platform technology for other interventional medical devices, which we can maybe get into as we continue talking. But that technology platform really is what attracted us. And so we co-led the Series B+ with Fiscus and Reimagine Ventures, and brought in additional investors like TDK Ventures and Solasta Ventures, and a handful of others. So that's kind of the background as to how we found the company and got to know them over the course of the last few months.
Yeah, I guess I didn't read the release all the way through, but I wasn't aware of the fact that it could be used to deliver therapies as well. It sounded strictly more of an imaging play, a portable imaging play, which we're seeing a lot of. So I thought the talk of the apps and sort of the data collection too was particularly interesting also. But so how much of the company's future do you think will fall under that bioelectronic umbrella? Is this, you think, a big part of the company's future, or is it more of a potential application at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think not surprisingly from a venture capitalists and board members' perspective, the company really has a lot on its plate and should be focused on delivering on that mission, on the vision in diagnostic point-of-care handheld ultrasound. That said, we did extensive technical diligence with some of the foremost experts in the ultrasound industry to evaluate the potential of the technology. And it's clear just by virtue of inbound interest from a variety of potential partners that there's real interest in exploring other uses of the chip-based PMUT technology. So I think it's an inevitability that they will further execute on that strategy to either partner with outside companies or innovators in the bioelectronic realm, as well as with potential partners in other industries for, again, interventional device technologies, whether that's, endoscopic procedures that are looking to have better imaging on board, or surgical robotics, also similarly to help improve the imaging at the point of intervention and at the point of surgical access. So those are things that I think with time will come, and we'll evaluate how much is done in-house, how much is done as a partnership.
So did the interest in the bioelectronic applications precede your interest in the company? That was always part of their plan, or is that potential being emphasized because of the interest from GSK and other investors who are interested in that kind of application?
No, they had been interested in this space already in neuromodulation and bioelectronic medicine. They had been tracking a lot of interesting publications that have been, come out of Nature and some other, preeminent journals. Some of their advisors had experience in that regard. For instance, I know GE and Medtronic have published on, or have been part of publications in some early proof of principle work. So there has been some noise out there that this could be an emerging field. And so their advisors had been, putting that in front of them. This founding team is terrific, just some of the best that I've seen in the industry, and they've worked together, serially in the past. And so, yeah, they saw that opportunity and had really been beginning to form thoughts there and beginning to take some action. So we certainly helped fuel that. And again, it's something that the company will continue to pursue, but right now laser focused on, the first commercial launch here and deployment into hospitals and emergency rooms around the country, and hopefully increasing access to ultrasound around the world.
So it seems like a great avenue for a bioelectronics application to sort of be able to build a business and get into the hospitals through other means as well, because bioelectronics is still emerging. You've been following the bioelectronics field for several years, as you mentioned, since Action Potential started up. I know we've talked about it several times, and last week we got an update from Renee Ryan, the CEO of Kaila Health, on what they're up to. What's your overall sense of the evolution of bioelectronics? Where are we, if I may pull out my tired and true baseball metaphor, what inning are we in sort of the development and adoption of bioelectronics?
Yeah, no, I'll have to think about the baseball analogy. I don't think we're quite at the seventh inning stretch, but I feel that the progress that's been made across a variety of approaches to bioelectronic medicines, whether they be implantable with traditional devices and systems, Canon lead systems that are de-risking and validating new clinical targets. I think CVRX is a great example of that for heart failure, or new companies developing microstimulators that are really tailored nicely for the patient population that they're going after, such as Setpoint Medical for rheumatoid arthritis with a microstimulator for vagus nerve stimulation, or Nuspera Medical with a injectable sacral nerve stimulation therapy that's externally powered. That those are advancing. There's also, as you pointed out, Kaila Health and what the team there has done with transcutaneous stimulation for essential tremor as a first indication. We're just really encouraged by the breadth of innovation and the way that the community has sort of continued to push the boundaries and the definitions of what is a bioelectronic medicine. Importantly, companies that have been somewhat later stage have done really well in commercial activities and having gone public or being rewarded for that, such as Axonics, Inspire, Nevro. We view the success of medical device IPOs has been a huge part of that has been the neuromodulation industry and these frontline early generation, I should say, bioelectronic medicines. So I would say we are starting to see what 5-6 years ago was a long-term vision. We're seeing it continue to play out, frankly, better than I had expected across the entire medical device industry, and geographically also globally, seeing a lot of innovation in Europe, in Australia, in some select areas of Asia. So we couldn't be happier with the actual evolution of this category. And I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, if you believe in the research and the learnings that will continue to come from brain research that's funded by government sources and has really advanced the knowledge there over the last decade, those are translating directly into this field and opening up a variety of new opportunities. And I'm still learning daily. I don't think anyone in this field isn't. So it keeps it fun. It keeps it exciting. I think the promise is only greater than it's ever been. And, we love seeing tech companies. We love seeing, pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies all sort of putting their heads together and their dollars together to this category reality, whether they're driven by the therapies or they're driven by the data that's generated. It's all being enabled by the technology push from the tech industry and consumer electronics and other fields. So it's really exciting time, I think.
Excellent. And just final question, kind of off topic from both Action Potential and Echo. You're a founding board member of LatinxVC. You founded that last year. What's its mission, and what have you been able to do over the past year and a half?
Yeah, I'm really excited about LatinxVC, and my co-founding board members and I are working diligently to bring a nonprofit forward that really raises the conversation and essentially drives the representation, the upward career progression, the ability to write checks by Latina venture capitalists as one segment of the industry that's been sorely underrepresented, not just within the venture capital funds that we work at, but also amongst the executive teams and leadership teams of our portfolio companies in healthcare and life sciences. And I think that obviously this year, as have the last, frankly, 4 years, this question of, are we doing enough as an industry to address, first acknowledge the disparity in representation amongst partners and investing partners at various venture capital funds, the number of new funds and emerging managers that are getting funded by LPs that are of a Latino or Hispanic background. The same is true with Black VC, which is an organization that really inspired our forming LatinxVC and who we collaborate with closely. Really fundamentally, we view ourselves as a piece of a bigger effort to again bring this to this topic of conversation, help allow aspiring investors from a Latino background to find mentors and learn ways in which to break into the industry, which is infamously challenging to break into despite, no matter what your background is. It's a very opaque sort of cottage industry that's driven in large part by, sort of apprenticeship model, and which favors those that look and act and come from similar places to people in decision-making places within current venture funds, which makes it exceptionally difficult for minorities who are trying to enter the field. So that's our overall goal. We have some metrics that we are trying to increase the percentage of Latina investors in the industry over the course of the next 5 and 10 years. It's sort of in the 1% to 2% range as we speak, and we think we can do a whole lot better. So that was the intent. We're getting a lot of support, and I think it's just the beginning, but certainly more to report on, hopefully, over time.
Excellent. No, it's a great effort. And if we can ever be of assistance, you know where to find us. Where can folks find you? I've actually haven't asked this question on the podcast before, but I should. You're on social media. You're out there. Where are you on Twitter? How can we find you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely, yes. So on LinkedIn, my handle there is JP Mas. And on Twitter, I think my handle is Juan-Pablo Mas, all one word. LinkedIn and Twitter are the two best places to hear what we're doing at our companies, at our firm, and even career opportunities. Increasingly, we're posting opportunities on social media, and increasingly with LatinxVCs as well. We have at LatinxVC for both LinkedIn and Twitter. So those are sources for venture opportunities as well as operating opportunities at our companies.
Well, I'm glad we have that info out there, and I'm glad you're physically well. I hope you get back home quickly, safe and sound. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the kind wishes there, and I too hope we get home soon. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing at Action Potential.
All right. Well, it was great to reconnect with Juan-Pablo Mas, and now here we are. The big number one. It hasn't been numbers 5 through 2, so I'm willing to wager maybe it rhymes with rabbit, something like that.
Yeah, you got that right. Abbott, not only one of the best workplaces for innovators, as we saw number 2, but they won emergency use authorization for their COVID-19 test card, the Binax Now AG card, which is an antigen test for the virus that can be read directly off the testing card. Basically, they compared it to, it's similar to the technology used in some pregnancy tests. They also developed an accompanying app, which would serve as some sort of almost mobile passport that would prove that you have tested negative, should you test negative or positive, which I think will eventually be pretty crucial if any events, sporting events, conventions are to return. The company said they're going to ship tens of millions of tests in September and then ramp up to 50 million tests a month at the start of October, and they're going to be $5 a piece.
So will we be sharing screenshots of our approved? No, we won't be doing that. That would be no. I'm sure there's a safeguard against that, but that's really critical. And as someone with a kid looking to get back to high school pretty soon, it'll be nice to have another level of, I guess, of surety that people are healthy. So hopefully it will make a real impact. And Chris, again, not doing a very good job of taking time off, sent me an email just a bit ago saying that Abbott stock is up 9%. This is as of Thursday afternoon on the news. And this is really the kind of news that I think is getting a lot of attention. I've had a couple of friends who are not in Medtech mention that test as being a big deal in their lives. So I hope this is something that can, again, restore some normalcy and maybe help people get together. I don't know, Chris, what would you like? Oh God, I miss Chris so much. I don't know, Sean and Danielle, what would you like to do the first opportunity you get to get back into a crowded space?
Well, if the Red Sox were any good, maybe that. But
good point.
Anything at this point, been so deprived of the feeling of being in a crowd. But I do hope that this ends up serving the greater good and helping get back to whatever normal might be.
Amen. And Danielle, anything you want to do when we got out of this jail?
Yeah, I want to peruse the aisles of Trader Joe's leisurely. Without feeling rushed.
Lady, you've been in here for like 4 hours now. You gotta go. Oh, but I missed it so much. That's a good one. All right, great. Well, that's a wrap. Great job, guys. As I've always end these podcasts, we like to let folks know how they can find us. I'm on Twitter. I am at MedTech.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Tom Salemi. Danielle, where are you on the social media channels?
On Twitter, I'm at Danielle_Kirsh, Kirsh. And same on LinkedIn, Danielle Kirsh.
Excellent. And Sean, where can we find you?
On Twitter, I am Sean, SEAN, Whooley, WHOOLEY, WTWH. That's my Twitter handle. And then on LinkedIn, Sean Whooley. You can reach me there as well.
Excellent. Great. Well, folks should definitely connect with you. You guys are generating some really great content on Mass Device, and that's the quickest way to find it, I think. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. If you could share it, that would be a great help. If you could tell your colleagues about it, that would be a great help. If you could subscribe to make sure you get these podcasts as soon as they come out, that's always a great thing, too. A lot of people listen to this the day or the second day it comes out. So you shouldn't wait. You should subscribe and get the podcast sent to you as immediately as soon as possible, I should say. And thanks again for joining us on this week's DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast.